All right, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to piece together clues from frozen caves, high-altitude plateaus, and believe it or not, even our own bodies, all to uncover a lost branch of the human family tree. You know, for the longest time, that's exactly what the Denisovans were. They were basically a ghost lineage, this mysterious group of ancient humans we knew about more from the genetic echoes they left inside of us than from any actual fossils. They were like a whisper in our genome. So, where does a story like this even begin? Well, it starts in this one specific place, a remote, freezing cold cave in Siberia. Back in 2010, the very first clues were found right here, and they were just tiny fragments, barely enough to hint at the people they once belonged to. This was ground zero. The whole story, and this is wild, kicks off with clues that were just unbelievably small. We're talking about a single piece of a finger bone and a couple of teeth. The amazing thing, the reason we're even talking about this, is that against all odds, they still had ancient DNA preserved inside. And that was the start of this genetic ghost story. But then, everything changed. The case just blew wide open with the first really big piece of physical evidence, and it was found hundreds and hundreds of miles away, on what's basically the roof of the world. This was the discovery that started to give our ghost a face. And here it is. Just look at this. This is the Xiahe mandible, found on the Tibetan Plateau. You can see it on the one side, still stuck in the rock it was found in, and then on the other, a cleaned-up digital version. This was an absolute game-changer. For the very first time, we had a really substantial fossil of a Denisovan. Okay, but here's the catch, and it was a big one. Unlike those first fragments from Siberia, this fossil was so old that no DNA survived. It was gone. So how on earth could they prove that this jawbone actually belonged to a Denisovan? Well, scientists turned to this totally groundbreaking technique called paleoproteomics. The best way to think about it is like this. If DNA is the complete instruction manual for building a body, proteins are the actual tools and machinery built from those instructions. And the key thing is, proteins can survive for way, way longer than DNA. So they were basically dusting for molecular fingerprints left behind in the bone. And the results? I mean, they were just jaw-dropping. The protein fingerprint they got from the jawbone was a near-perfect match to the Denisovan genome sequenced from those tiny bones in Siberia. Using some pretty complex stats, they calculated the probability at 0.99. In science, that's about as close to a slam dunk as you can possibly get. The ghost finally had a jawbone. So just when scientists thought they were getting a handle on these guys as, a cold-weather, high-altitude people, the story took another sharp turn. This time, the trail of clues led them somewhere completely different. I mean, think about this for a second. We've established that Denisovans could handle the freezing cold of Siberia and the thin, low-oxygen air of Tibet. But could they also have adapted to the hot, humid tropics of Southeast Asia? It seemed like a totally different world. And the answer, unbelievably, came from this, a single tooth. It was found in a place called Cobra Cave in Laos, and its shape was a dead ringer for a Denisovan molar. Protein analysis later confirmed it. It belonged to a young girl who lived there more than 130,000 years ago in a warm, forested environment. So with this one little tooth, the known world of the Denisovans just exploded. Look at this map. We're talking from the Altai Mountains of Siberia to the high plateau of Tibet, and now all the way down to the tropics of Laos. This proved they were one of the most widespread and incredibly adaptable groups of humans to ever live. But honestly, the most shocking clue of all, it wasn't dug up from a cave. It wasn't buried in the earth. It was found inside of us. Inside the DNA of people who are alive right now. To really get this, you have to understand just how brutal the Tibetan Plateau is. The big challenge is something called hypoxia. There's about 40% less oxygen in the air up there. For most people, just functioning is a massive struggle. And yet, people live there and they thrive. How? Well, it turns out modern Tibetans have a secret weapon. It's a special version of a gene called EPS1. People sometimes call it the superathlete gene because it helps the body use oxygen with incredible efficiency. It's basically a biological superpower for living in thin air. And here's the crucial twist. Scientists figured out that this superpower didn't originally evolve in Homo sapiens. It was a gift. It was passed down through something called integration, which is just a fancy term for ancient interbreeding. Yep, modern humans got this life-saving gene directly from Denisovans. And this is why that jawbone we saw earlier is so important. It just clicks the final piece of the puzzle into place. It's the hard, physical proof that Denisovans actually lived in that exact high-altitude environment for long enough to evolve this amazing adaptation, which they then passed on to us. So when you step back and you put all of this evidence together, the Siberian finger bone, the Tibetan jaw, that tooth from Laos, and the DNA inside of us, it paints a picture of our own family history that is so much messier and frankly, way more interesting than we ever imagined. What this really shows us is that ancient Southeast Asia, wow, it wasn't some empty space our ancestors just walked into. It was a crowded neighborhood, an absolute hotspot for all different kinds of humans. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years, our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, that's us, we weren't alone. We were sharing the planet with Denisovans, with Neanderthals, with the tiny Homo floresiensis, you might know them as the Hobbit, and others too. This totally shreds the old, simple idea of a straight line of human evolution. It was a tangled, interactive, and absolutely fascinating family web. You know, the whole story of the Denisovans started out as a ghost story written in our DNA. And it just goes to show you how a few tiny, scattered clues can completely flip our understanding of who we are and where we come from. It really makes you wonder, what other ghosts are still out there, buried in the ground or hidden in our own genes, just waiting to be found?